The operation is Mavi Marmara, code-named Operation Seabreeze or Operation Skywinds, was an attempt to block the Free Gaza Movement's ninth attempt to break the naval blockade imposed by Israel on the Gaza Strip. Israel proposed inspecting the cargo at the Port of Ashdod and then delivering non-blockaded goods through land crossings, but this proposal was turned down. Israeli forces then raided and seized the Gaza-bound ships in international waters of the Mediterranean. Israeli Navy warships flanked the flotilla and an aircraft flew overhead after it ignored Israeli instructions. Speedboats were prevented from approaching the Mavi Marmara by throwing broken dishes and metal chains. The other ships were boarded from speedboats. Israeli forces were met by passive resistance on 5 of the ships, but clashes broke out aboard the Mavi Marmara. A team of 15 Israeli Shayetet 13 naval commandos abseiled onto the ships from helicopters with paintball guns, plastic bullet, riot dispersal handguns and hidden firearms. The first team commander was thrown over the deck head down, abducted and stabbed, along with a second commando, and a third was grabbed off the rope. They were taken to an inside room and medically treated by the activists, who left the knife in the commander's stomach. A stun grenade from the abducted soldiers was thrown at the commandos, and a handgun was allegedly taken from one soldier and fired by an activist, who was intercepted. The soldiers' captors escaped, and the Israeli commander pulled the knife out of his body and jumped overboard along with a second soldier. The third, with severe head injury, was left and found by his comrades later. The raid ended with 9 activists killed and dozens injured. A UNHRC fact-finding mission described 6 of the 9 passengers' deaths as summary execution by the Israeli commandos. The commandos were ordered to use live fire. In the melee, 5 activists were killed, and 2, wounded by rubber bullets, died a short time later. According to the Israeli timeline video, within 5 minutes the roof was secured, with the assistance of an extra 15-man commando unit. Only 15 minutes later the commandos began the ship takeover with live ammunition and a third team of fighters. A BBC documentary concluded that Israeli forces had faced a violent premeditated attack by a group of hardcore IHH activists who intended to orchestrate a political act to put pressure on Israel. The program was criticized as biased by critics of Israel, and the PSC, Palestine Solidarity Campaign, questioned why the IDF boarded the ship at night if it had peaceful intention. 7 Israeli commandos were injured in the skirmish. After seizing control of the ships, Israeli forces towed them to Ashdod and detained the passengers. Both sides place responsibility for the bloodshed on the other, and accounts of the events vary. The raid prompted widespread international reactions and demonstrations around the world. The United Nations Security Council condemned those acts resulting in civilian deaths, demanded an impartial investigation of the raid, 36, and called for the immediate release of civilians held by Israel. Israel released all passengers of the flotilla by the 6th of June 2010. The incident threatened the already deteriorating relations between Turkey and Israel. Turkish President Abdullah Gül described the raid as an attack on Turkey for the first time since World War I. Israel initially rejected calls from the United Nations and world governments for an international investigation into its raid on the Gaza aid flotilla, but later agreed to cooperate with an investigation conducted by the United Nations. Israel formed the Turkal Committee to investigate the raid. The committee, headed by retired Supreme Court of Israel Judge Jacob Turkal, included 2 international observers. The conclusions of an internal inquiry by the Israel Defense Forces under retired General Giora Eiland were presented to the Chief of Staff, Gabi Ashkenazi, on the 12th of July 2010. Eiland's report found that the naval commandos had carried out their duties with professionalism, bravery and resourcefulness, and the commanders had exhibited correct decision-making. The report further determined the use of live fire was justified and that the entire operation was estimable. In August 2010, United Nations Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon announced that the UN would conduct an investigation of the incident. A separate investigation was conducted by the United Nations Human Rights Council. The findings of this committee, published on the 22nd of September 2010, called the Israeli operation disproportionate and condemned its unacceptable level of brutality. The UN Human Rights Council had also condemned the raid in June, before its investigation. Another resolution backing the report was passed despite American opposition and EU abstention. Israel accused the UNHRC of a biased, politicized and extremist approach. 48. Benjamin Netanyahu described the actions of the soldiers as a clear case of self-defense. The Israeli Supreme Court, which rejected several local legal suits against the flotilla raid, wrote in its verdict, the soldiers were forced to respond in order to defend their lives. 5 shipments had been allowed through prior to the 2008-09 Gaza war. But all shipments following the war were blocked by Israel. This flotilla was the largest to date. An Islamic aid group from Turkey, the Ayush Foundation for Human Rights and Freedoms and Humanitarian Relief, sponsored a large passenger ship and 2 cargo ships. On the 22nd of March 2013, Netanyahu apologized for the incident in a 30-minute telephone call with Erdogan, stating that the results were unintended. The Turkish Prime Minister accepted apology and agreed to enter into discussions to resolve the compensation issue. Following the telephone apology, Israel's Channel 10 television channel reported that compensation talks had commenced. However, a disparity became immediately apparent, as Turkey sought $1 million for each of the flotilla deaths, while Israel's response was $100,000. As of the 27th of March 2013, an agreement was made between the two nations in regard to 3 points. 1. Compensation will only be paid to the family members of the people killed aboard the Marmara. 2. Confirmation of a signed commitment from Turkey, whereby Turkey will be unable to sue Israel over the incident. 3. The Turkish government will return the monetary compensation to Israel in the event that civilian lawsuits are ever filed by Turkish citizens. A meeting was also planned for the discussion of future relations between Turkey and Israel. One of participants of the Gaza flotilla, Sanar al-Bayrak, told the Turkish newspaper Aksam in response to the Israeli apology, "What is the importance of the apology? We killed 9 people and are sorry. Of course it sounds ridiculous. I say this is what the state should have done. If Turkey only had prevented this at the start. But we asked for it. We went there ourselves." According to Hurriyet Daily News Semi-Idis, some Turkish citizens are even suggesting that those involved with the Mavi Marmara incident should also bring charges against the Turkish state for playing a prominent role in supporting the Mavi Marmara's mission and for failing to prevent the death of 9 Turks on the ships.